Michigan State University's Office of K-12 Outreach, bringing research, innovation, and best practices to educators across Michigan, the United States, and the world. I'm Shirley Jackson, an outreach specialist in the Office of K-12 Outreach in the College of Education at Michigan State University. Thank you for joining us as part of our office's focus on International Women's History Month. We see this as an opportunity to celebrate women who've made tremendous contributions to the world in general, but especially here in Michigan. During our tribute to women, our office will connect with incredible leaders who've chosen careers in education. I must say that we're impressed by the innumerable ways these really super women influence our thinking about education and about their almost tireless interactions with systems that have the power, frankly, to create or dismantle our chances at full participation in society. But most importantly, people like today's guests challenge our thinking about what we owe the learners we're privileged to serve. And since their work so critically affects students who range from our tiniest children to young adults studying at colleges and universities, we think it's important to hear from them. So having given you some background on these interviews, I'm pleased to introduce Punita Thurman, Vice President of Program and Strategy at the Skillman Foundation in Detroit. Skillman describes itself as a fierce champion of Detroit children, and we agree. Full disclosure, though, some years ago, I was privileged to work on a project with Punita, directed as a part of Skillman's long history of partnership with schools in Detroit. Punita, it is apparent that the foundation fully appreciates how much its mission benefits from your depth of knowledge, skills, and commitment. You come with a multifaceted portfolio of work in both the public and private sectors. And I should note that your work on really transformational policy-focused projects with school districts, state commissions and initiatives, and even some Fortune 500 companies are impressive.
Thank you.
It also bears mentioning that your long list of achievements make you a person I'm excited to interview. Thank you for taking time to come and speak with me. I'm thrilled to have you here.
Shirley, thank you for the opportunity. It's so great to reconnect, and we're grateful for the many partnerships that we have, and certainly the MSU K-12 outreach, bringing the power of such a strong institution committed to kids and educators. I'm grateful to be here.
Thank you so much. Now, I realize how busy you are, and I want to take full advantage of this opportunity, so I'm going to just jump in.
Sure.
Something I've learned about you is that you are no office-bound executive type. You're very hands-on in your approach to projects. So I wonder, what do you see as your most significant career achievements?
There are so many different opportunities when I think about the work that I've done in the private sector, working in a school district, working now in philanthropy, all aimed at making big change. The big things that I've learned about how hard it is to make change happen.
Something I've learned about you is that you're not an office-bound executive type. You're really hands-on in your approach to projects. So I wonder what you see as your most significant career achievements.
Shirley, I've had the great privilege of being able to work in the private sector, working in school districts, and now in philanthropy to try to impact big change. And there are several opportunities that I can think about, but a few that I would highlight to you. One is work that I did when I worked for the superintendent in Fort Worth and really had to bring together a team of leaders across the district, across the community, including educators, to build out a $5 million differentiated compensation school improvement strategy called PEAK. We called it Public Educators Accelerating Kids, and really thought differently about how to take something like compensation and supports for educators and to package them with real opportunities to bring our most committed and highly skilled professionals to the students who needed them the most. It took a whole community to come together, to commit to the investment that it would take, and to be united in how we would turn those schools around. I have learned so much from that work that I carry forward into our work here as a working in philanthropy, where we don't run schools, but we have a tremendous opportunity to think about how to bring together multiple stakeholders from different communities, how to really listen to what teachers need and value, and to think about how to provide some innovation in the system that we can all learn from, and to make big things happen. Our educators are the key to making sure schools support them in their growth in order for them to support kids in their growth.
Wow. So it's kind of that old hat that was going around for a while. If you don't feed the teachers, they'll eat the children. So that concept.
Yeah. And there are, I think across the state, across the country, we know educators are in this work with mission and a desire to get better and to get stronger. But a lot of what's in the system, our systems are not designed in ways that actually support all children to learn, and therefore not designed to ensure that all educators have everything that they need to support those children. So part of our work, as you mentioned, in order to support kids is to make sure that the adults who serve them are supported and well compensated and have great opportunities for career pathways. All of that matters if you care about kids.
Absolutely. So it sounds as if that was a successful initiative there in Texas.
There were definitely things that were successful about it. As in any endeavor, when you try innovation, you also learn a lot. So there were things that, quite honestly, we tried and didn't work out so well. It did yield an opportunity with the pilot that we did yielded a $45 million investment from the federal government and the teacher incentive fund kind of work. But we were able to go after that bigger grant because we made some mistakes early and were able to try to redesign the work in a way to sustain what was working.
But, that's what you said that is so important, and that people, I think, sometimes fail to realize, especially our systems connected to education and schools, is that what seem like large investments are really small investments in the long run that really attract others who have dollars to even take us even farther than we thought we could go. So it's worth the effort to try those innovative means.
I think that's right. And as I have been in philanthropy, I think it's more and more clear there's a role for philanthropy to try to seed some of that innovation, to try to take bigger risks. But fundamentally, our work is also rooted in policy because there's only so far that philanthropy can go to help schools get better. And we have as much a role as trying to seed some of those pilots or to try on different opportunities or to fill in gaps. But there's a role for philanthropy too, in thinking about how to ensure there is a strong set of information, that there are actors enabled in the policy space who can be centering children and the adults who serve them, and that we're investing as much in narrative and information sharing that can help fuel policy change, because fundamentally the system and the policy that regulates it will always trump any sort of good pocket of success.
I think you're right. So you're telling us also that the stories we tell about the work we do are important as well.
Vitally important. And we have been doing some work certainly on behalf of Detroit kids, but the more we've been working with partners across the state, it's clear that some of the same issues that plague educators and students in Detroit plague students in Flint, plague students in Muskegon, and even unlikely allies in our rural communities that are suffering the same kinds of teacher shortages. And so there is an opportunity, an imperative, quite honestly, for us to think about how to bring together stories, experiences, and to build power together about how policy should be changed in the state of Michigan.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that rural component being sometimes an area, a service area that gets skipped over, really.
Yeah.
And you're helping to remind us that we really do have much more in common. We look different sometimes. The places we live and work look different, but actually we're all a part of this picture, and none of us can be excluded.
No, Michigan's prosperity, our future together, it demands a higher performing education system. And it requires all of us to think about what are the barriers, what are the reasons that we haven't been able to ensure that every child is able to succeed to their full aspiration and potential. Whether you're in Traverse City or the UP or Detroit, we as a state need every child to be able to reach their full potential. And we need schools everywhere to be able to support their educators to meet all of the varying needs of kids in our state.
You're right. That old saw about we're only as strong as our weakest link is so true. And you point that out very ably here. This is Women's History Month, Punita. So an obvious question is to ask you, you've talked about some of your successes. Who were the women who mentored you and were influential? And what was their impact on your career path?
I would be remiss if I didn't start first with my mother. As a child of immigrant parents who came to this country, came to this area over 50 years ago, I learned a lot watching my mom be a working mom and be the mother of 3 daughters who never saw their gender as a barrier. She encouraged us. She had high expectations, as did my dad, but she really modeled what it looked like to be someone who really had a career, was comfortable and energized by the work that she did, and encouraged us to find that balance as well. She really helped us think about all that we could be. But I've also been very fortunate to work in my career with powerful, amazing female leaders who have inspired, from Deborah Ball at the University of Michigan and Teaching Works, to Tanya Allen at the Skillman Foundation and Carol Goss, to many leaders I worked with in the private sector. And they each have taught me many different skills about being comfortable in your own skin as a woman, seeing the power of leadership that looks different than the ways that sometimes leadership is defined in books, but each brought their heart and encouraged me to think about bringing my full authentic self to leadership.
Wow. What you've just said is so important, because I think often, not just women, but anybody who feels perhaps somewhat marginalized thinks they have to reinvent themselves somehow and actually be another person. But you're telling us that you learned from your mother and from these other amazing women that you've had the opportunity to work with, that it's about really getting to know who you are and benefiting from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we spend a lot of time thinking about what your strengths and weaknesses are and how can you get better. And time and time I am reminded and supported and coached into thinking far more about what are your strengths and lean all the way into the strengths that you have. Certainly be aware of where you may need to grow and want to grow. But part of being a leader is building a team that can complement your strengths. And we could spend all day trying to get better at things that we aren't great at. And I have many of those things, but I have been encouraged and seen the benefit of taking what you are good at and really finding places that can amplify and leverage the strengths that you bring.
Well, I hope that message comes through really loudly and clearly to young people who may, if we're fortunate, listen to this interview and learn from it. As you think about the impact that women have had on you and really on society as a whole, and the long road that we're still traveling toward equity for women, what do you feel is maybe the most significant challenge women face today?
I think it is this set of expectations that fall on. I am not only a professional, I am a mother and a wife. And there was this, I know growing up, this notion that you could have it all. You can do, what was it? Fry the bacon up in a pan, bring it, some commercial. Growing up that a real woman could do all of those things. And the truth is, you can do all of those things, but you cannot do all of those things all at once. Sometimes it is about finding the right pace of priorities, thinking about volume. When I had children, I made choices in my career that I needed to slow down or take sideways, or I've built great networks around me. It really is a village. Take all the help that you can get. You can do it all, but don't imagine that you have to do it all yourself or that you have to do it all at once.
And, I remember when we worked together, that was a philosophy that you held. And I recall that sometimes we'd have to be a little creative in how we manage to get together to do our work.
Right.
And just having the common sense and courage to say to people with whom you work, let's do this a little different, makes all the difference in the world, actually. So I appreciate that. You've lifted for us that the challenge women have, the greatest challenge, is understanding that you can do it all, But you have to think really carefully about how it gets done and perhaps when it gets done.
And to ask for help. Sometimes there's this notion that winning is about doing, proving yourself and doing it alone. But I have learned the power of asking for help, taking help when it is offered, and being graceful first with yourself when you make mistakes, because you will, and graceful with others
who may also
for sure
have some of the same challenges. That's right. We usually assume that it's just us, but you're helping us understand that these are challenges that every woman, indeed every person probably has. So that's a strength that women have, the ability to lean on one another, I think, and they need to seize it on a regular basis, probably.
I think that's true. I worked for the Women's Initiative when I was at Deloitte Consulting, sort of across the whole firm. There was an initiative set up about how to support more women leaders. And we learned in doing that work that while it might have been women who were asking for flexibility or the ability to speed up or slow down their careers, as we started to build out that infrastructure, it was not just women who were wanting that or who benefited from that, and found men in our firm who were just as interested and benefited from that kind of flexibility and pace, but just didn't have, it just wasn't the norm for them to ask for it. So we really did, in the spirit of equity, we were building something for women, but found, as you often do when you target some supports for a particular population, that actually all of the workers in the firm benefited by some of the infrastructure and policy that was built.
Wow. You're pointing out to us that having a diverse workforce also works to everybody's benefit, because, of course, challenges are different for different people across the workforce. And for years, people probably have suffered from not wanting to be the person who has to ask for accommodation, and only to find out that accommodation is something that all of us need at certain times.
100%. And again, I think part of this, I would say to women, is know your value, know the contribution, and value it so that you can ask for those accommodations. Employers want the very best talent, and leaders will be creative with you. They will find those ways to make you fully equipped to do what you need to do.
I thank you for that. We've been talking about all of the ways that we can turn obstacles into gateways, really. So it makes me wonder, when we look at people like you who seem to have it all, who seem to have found that golden spot in the executive suite, we think that you haven't had any real obstacles, that maybe the only obstacles you've faced are, can I find a babysitter so that I can attend a meeting? But maybe you can tell us about a specific obstacle that you faced as a woman and how you handled it. You've given us some examples, but is there anything more specific?
Yeah, let me first start by saying absolutely lots of obstacles, lots of mistakes, lots of failures, and I'd be glad to share more than one example. But I do want to remind you and myself and others that the most important thing is not the failure or not failing. It's what you do when you fail. And do you have, can you find the resilience and the support to get up and try again? Because that's what I've learned, is in many different ways that I've thought about obstacles or barriers that were sometimes real and sometimes self-imposed. It had a lot to do with starting with my mindset and internal self-talk, even before external. So I would really just encourage starting with yourself in all of these instances. When I think about barriers, I came into a school district from the private sector. There was an opportunity for that was bringing private sector leaders into large urban districts to help them transform. And I will tell you, I had all the answers about what it was going to take an 80,000 student district in Texas that I worked in. I had all the answers in the first 2 months of being there. I just knew what it would take. If we could just follow this roadmap. And 5 years later, many bruises and obstacles and failures, quite honestly, I often tell people I left with far fewer answers and much more humility about the complexity of transforming schools and districts. And I can think about times and conversations that almost make me cringe because I didn't know what I didn't know when I was talking to different leaders. And so, but it is by their grace and by my willingness to go back and say, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Would you please invest some more, or can we try again? That I was able to rebuild some of the harm that I created. And it certainly helped me sharpen a deeper, much deeper, more nuanced understanding of why schools and classrooms and districts struggle, and instilled a much deeper sense of understanding and humility about the complexity of this work that continues to serve me today.
Wow, that was powerful. It really was, because I think that's something that school districts and individual schools even grapple with all of the time. Everybody's been to school and they think they have the answers. It looks really simple from the seat where you might be sitting. You're pointing out for us that this is really tough work, and that you don't just turn around a failing program on a dime with a few bullet points, et cetera. So
not even a few dollars.
Even a few dollars. You're right. Sometimes dollars are not they are an answer, but certainly not the most important answer all the time. Wow.
Absolutely. And, I do this work in education, having come from the private sector, not ever having been trained as a teacher. And early in this work, I thought it was a great deficit to be in the work because I wasn't a trained classroom leader. And I really do think now that it is quite an asset for me, because I don't have any assumptions about what it takes. I just have seen lots of great educators, and I have, it has actually forced me to not make assumptions and to ask more questions, because I don't know and I wasn't trained. And fortunately, I've been surrounded with people generous to talk about their craft and to talk about the barriers and the challenges. And as I think about our policy work and policymakers, that's actually part of the missing ingredient is that we need often people who are making really big decisions that impact down to the classroom, often don't have this knowledge. And more importantly, they don't have the ability to hear from teachers and principals and leaders. And so part of the work at the Skillman Foundation is also about amplifying voices of educators so that their voices can be part of policy conversations. I have been I have been privileged. The Skillman Foundation has been part of a collaborative called Launch Michigan, and it has been an imperative in that work to conduct not one, but now two statewide educator surveys so that that feedback is part of the recommendations and the counsel that this collaborative is trying to put forward around policy change. And we need more voices from educators to be informing policy and to be informing policymakers at the local level, whether it's in your district or at your school level, to the school board, all the way up to state policy and beyond. We need educators and practitioners who live this work to be able to share their stories and to inform others who may not have that kind of proximity.
You're right. So you're really helping us understand again that it's the collective skills of all of us, and certainly among the most important voices to listen to are the people who are actually doing the work. It's not them alone, because their skill set may not be the only thing that's needed to try to right the ship, but certainly we can't do this work without listening to them, without hearing them, and giving them an opportunity to share.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also goes down to students, like the opportunity to have students' voices amplified just alongside educators is incredibly important. Again, at the school level, at the district level, at the school boardroom, up to state policy, we need both of those voices, and parents and families and community, but we really need to make sure that there is a broad sector of voices informing and engaged in this policy making work.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, Punita. We're talking about all of this education related stuff. And as I think about it, I'm envisioning young people, especially young women, because very honestly, most of the people who work in our K-12 schools are women. Mm-hmm. And as I think about young women who may be starting out on a career path, thinking about what they want to do, and maybe deciding that education is what they like to embark on, I wonder how you'd advise a young person who is starting on their career journey, maybe not just in education, but anything.
I'm glad you lifted that. I do want to remind our young teachers, who are mostly female, when you look at the demographics, that to pay attention to how that shifts over time, because the vast majority of school leaders and district leaders are men, but that is a disproportionate amount to sort of the representation that goes into the field. And so know that you have every capacity and right to be in those places of leadership as well, even though it doesn't always look like it represents you. You have that potential. And the second thing I would offer is be open. You'd be surprised at opportunities often come in the most unusual packages. I think about the kinds of transitions, even things I thought were setbacks that ended up being opportunities. So be open to taking on new responsibilities, new projects, even things that scare you and you think, I'm not ready to do this. Try them anyways. Try them. Go for it, ask for help, and know that the worst thing that could happen is that you just not take that opportunity to try and learn something new.
Wow. And you're pointing out that opportunities come all of the time. So even if one doesn't work out, you can be sure that there will be another one and that you will have learned.
When I was talking about that work at the Women's Initiative, I remember early in my career, I would look at women who had reached sort of different positions, and I thought, oh, they had a plan and they worked their plan. What's your plan? What's my plan? I gotta have to do this, and then I have to do this, and then I have to do this. And they said, those women that I reached out to, and I would say to you, have a plan and know that it's going to be 100% wrong, because it's about when you do good work, when you show an initiative, when you show an enthusiasm and an energy, it feeds the fuel for more opportunities to come your way. And sometimes it is a very non-linear path. I came from business to education to philanthropy. I never would have been able to chart sort of this path. I didn't even know it existed. But sometimes it's just being open and sharing that energy of openness to new opportunities that can open the most unusual doors.
So having a plan is something that everybody should absolutely have in place, but understand that there is no sure way to get to where you think you want to go without some obstacles getting in your place. And so plan also to address that.
Yeah, and be willing to take some risks, get uncomfortable. That's usually where you grow the most and where the most opportunities will make themselves open to you.
Wow, Punita, everything that you've said would have been so helpful to me. I won't say how many years ago, but back when I was starting, and I hope people are listening, you really described for us your hopes for the children of Michigan, your aspirations for women who may be coming along now as young leaders. And you've also told us about the impact women can have in the workplace. So we're at the end of the time that we've allotted for this conversation, and I'm just so grateful that you agreed to come and talk to us. I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon, and maybe you'll have even more wisdom to pass on.
Oh, well, thank you, Shirley. This was a tremendous opportunity, and I'm grateful to you. So glad our paths have crossed, and I look forward to it again.
Thank you so much, Punita. Punita Thurman, Vice President at the Skillman Foundation.